Can you talk a little bit about HB3
Yes.
and some of the reforms and why we didn't talk about those reforms?
Sure.
In the midst of that going through the House and then over to the Senate. The Senate was the one that really put in the really major reforms that made HB3 a really great bill.
So there are, I mean, we're at a crossroads in the state of Texas for, you know, how we are going to educate our kids going forward. And we all hear the stories of let's say, Detroit, Michigan, right? I mean, Detroit was one of the finest cities in America in the 40s and 50s, and began a decline after that. That most of us can't believe, you know, has happened in America, and the schools followed suit. And we have great public schools in Montgomery County, and then we have some things that we need to change in our public schools in general across the state and here. But as we work on those reforms in HB3, we have components in HB3 that are true reforms. We didn't just push money to the schools, to the public schools. And let me give you an example. 3 years ago, with our new education commissioner that Governor Abbott appointed, Mike Morath, he is a strong conservative and a proponent of true reforms that conservatives believe in, not just in Texas, but nationally. And he was able to implement in Dallas ISD, one of the lowest performing schools in Dallas Independent School District. Out of 45 schools, they were ranked number 39 out of 45. And this is elementary and middle school together. And so for 3rd and 5th graders as a variable, predominantly African American school, I think probably 93%, low socioeconomic, and at the bottom as a performer in the entire district. In 3 years of the performance measures that we've implemented into HB3, that particular school went from the bottom of the list on 45 schools to bumping Dallas Highland Park for number 1. It's not just teacher incentive pay. It is some other performance measures and components that we implemented within the bill. That when Education Commissioner Morath travels around the country and talks to other conservatives, that they simply don't believe that we got that many components in our HB3. They just don't believe that any state in the nation led to that extent. In those kinds of transformational principles and categories. And so the School Finance Commission that we established 2 years ago, when we did not get the school funding bill and the property tax reform bill done, we did implement that. And the School Finance Commission recommended over 30 policies to consider for true reforms to make sure that in a lot of our inner city metropolitan areas, as they continue to turn blue, that we don't become a Detroit, that we have the components in place where we know that our schools will continue to be strong and will continue to grow and thrive, and the public school framework can sustain. Out of those 30 recommendations, we have over 25 of them from the Senate version of the bill. When the House bill came over, there were 2. And we were able to hold the line and keep those components in place. So in other words, the House bill was saying, just put more money into public ed. And the Senate was saying down to the last 30 hours, we're not going to pass the bill unless you put these conservative principles and these true reforms in place. And we held the line and it got done.
TASB lined up strongly against this. The education community lined up strongly against this. But this is something that will help our kids, it will help our teachers. It's good legislation.
So along with those measures that were implemented in HB3, the basic allotment goes up for each child and there's a funding mechanism in place for the 65,000 kids that were not in Texas schools 2 years ago. So just that component alone on an average per pupil was over $2 billion. Two years before that, it was almost 80,000 new kids that weren't in Texas schools 2 years before that. Those are the kind of funding components. When we talk about $1 billion, it rolls off the tongue pretty easy. That's a lot of money. And so per average, that's included in the same. You've heard about the teacher pay raise. The Senate passed that at $5,000. It ended up at just under $4,000, and also includes some incentives. If you hit certain performance standards and you do a really good job and show it through teaching initiatives and performance itself, then there's incentive pay that's added into the mix. We cut Robin Hood by almost 50%. So, as we've relied on a framework since No Pass, No Play and Ross Perot's reforms in the 80s that have taken money from certain public schools, your tax dollars, and sent it to Austin to redistribute it, we cut Robin Hood by almost 50% just in this legislation for HB3, which for Montgomery County is a huge difference.